Hello again. We are here on our third session of Shift. I'm here with my friend Natascha Tello. My name's Brett Caldwell. How are you?
I am fantastic, Brett. Great to see you. This is one of my favorite topics, and we're going to talk all about remargining our business.
Yeah, remargining our business. Tell me what that means.
That means looking at our business and how are we going to get the profit margin out of our business when things are changing, right? So what needs to change, whether in our behavior or in our expenses, to get that margin back out of our business?
Yeah, so what I'm hearing you say is staying status quo is not good in this conversation. Not changing is not good in this conversation. In times of shift, that means things have to actually shift, right? And margining our business or remargining our business is one of the big encouragements we want to bring to the table today. And I think one of the most important concepts to understand in this is what's the difference between surviving and thriving? How do you think of those two words?
Yeah, I would say surviving is getting through something, right? As we're just, so for example, in our industry, surviving is making sure we're still a real estate agent or real estate consultant when we come through a shift. That's surviving. Thriving is we're having a rocking and rolling business. We're profitable. Things are running really well. And so in order to thrive, we've got to first survive when a market shifts.
100%. And I like to think of business like a fraction or a percentage. There's always a top number and a bottom number. Well, the top number is offense. And in our world, offense is really lead generation, going out and taking our unfair share and being focused on those lead generation and lead conversion activities. And by doing that, we actually cause our business to thrive, right? However, the bottom number is really what we're talking about here is how do I hold my money accountable? How do I trim the unnecessary expenses? Because remargining your business and is really expense management is how you survive in a shift. So we've got this dichotomy of how do we go thrive, but at the same time we got to make sure we're having conversations around surviving. So take us there.
Well, I say the first thing you need to do is start looking at your expenses, right? When a market is strong and things are good, and we've come through an incredibly strong market over the last year and a half, 2 years right now. And if we look at, other than that short term in COVID, we had several years of a very strong market. We get complacent, things happen. And as an industry, we are great at buying the next gadget and signing up for the next thing, both in business and in personal. It's part of our natural DNA, I think. And so what happens is we're not really paying attention. We're not always paying attention and scrutinizing those credit card statements. We sign up for subscription services. Sometimes we have duplication. Sometimes we have 3 of those things. And so what I'm going to encourage you to do, most important right now, is I want you to take out your bank statements and your credit card statements. And this is a great conversation to have if you have a business partner or a life partner that you do life with. You should have this conversation together and go through and remove those things and cancel those things that you have double and triple of. Right? The subscriptions for the different television shows that we started binge watching during the pandemic, right? Yeah. And so that's an easy one right there. And we think, this is $5, this is $10, this is $15, $20. But when we add it up, it's all creep that takes away from that profit margin that we're running with.
Yeah, somebody asked me the other day, do you know what you're all subscribed to in the streaming services? I have no clue. I think we've just added them on over the good years, and it's probably a personal conversation. And getting into the business conversation, I think one of the most important 2 words to help understand this a little bit is the difference between fixed cost and variable cost. So fixed cost is obviously a cost that's going to happen no matter what. It's on your income statement. And it's flat, like rent. You're gonna pay the rent on your office space every month. You're gonna pay the mortgage at your house every month. That is a fixed cost. However, on the personal side, a variable cost means, hey, I can make different choices around my streaming service or what we choose to spend our money around on food or consumption materials. And on the business side, we get to make choices around a lot of things in our business. And you talked about the shiny penny example, but there's so many other analogies to that. However, there's a lot of variable expense in a real estate agent's business. And what I want to take our conversation to now, and I'll kick it to you, Natascha, is how do you know what's an expense and how do you know what's an investment?
Well, I think the first thing you need to look at is if you are looking at something as an investment. An investment is something that brings you a return, right? So as an investor, whether it's in your real estate practice or in the stock market or in the crypto markets or in real estate, in housing, you've got to look for return on that money. So the way I look at it is for every dollar I send into the world, how many friends is that dollar going to bring back to me? So is my standard a 3-to-1? So, sitting with Gary Keller, he'll tell you your minimum standard 3-to-1, right? For every dollar I spend, I should receive at least 3 in return. Well, as you grow in your business, as you grow in your wealth, and as you grow in your investments, what you're going to realize is that your standards start to grow and you'll go from 3-to-1 to maybe a 5-to-1 return. So for every dollar I spend, I want at least 5 in return. And You've got some people that it's for every dollar, they want 20 in return, 10 in return. It really depends on how astute you are. And that's an investment. That's going to provide you a return. An expense, the opposite of that would be sort of an expense, something that you're spending money on. It won't necessarily, it might be a requirement of the business, but it's not necessarily going to be a return on that dollar. It's an actual requirement, right? So having a car, we're selling real estate, an automobile is an expense. Now, somebody will argue with me right now, it's been an investment. These crazy markets caused it, but it's not.
Well,
normal.
Yeah, of course, but most markets, it's an expense.
It's an expense, right? The gas we put in our car is an expense. What about the people that we invite to work with us in our world? What about that first hire? If you're at that point where you're going to be firing that first administrative assistant, would you say that's an expense or is that an investment?
Well, I like to think people are certainly an investment, Natascha, because they really are the fuel to our rocket ship, and they're the ones that really help us go. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't hold that investment accountable to a return.
Exactly. Right now, so all of our investments need to provide that return for us, and we need to look at things and get rid of things that don't provide a return. Now, Brett, in our industry, like if you look at major Fortune 500 companies, the one thing a Fortune 500 company doesn't remove or cut out during a shift or anything changing in their markets is their R&D, their research and development. Right. And so when we look at that as real estate agents, the first thing I often see people cut is what they're spending on education. And I'm going to tell you that's your R&D, your coaching, your training, your education, the stuff that's going to power you forward in a shift is not what you want to be looking at right now to cut out. That's where you actually want to be investing and shifting into high gear. That's what's going to help you get through.
Absolutely. And that's an ode to our conversation last week around just getting real and getting right and keeping your head in the game, right?
Absolutely.
100%. So let's move this conversation to budget and profit margin. And I know that's a dirty word for a lot of people around the word budget. And it's certainly, we don't like the constraint feeling of budget, and I understand that. However, we're talking about surviving here and ultimately thriving on the tail end of this, or even in this, with great lead generation. But you got to be a responsible business person, and in order to do that, you have to know where your money is, know where your money's going, and know what kind of return that money's bringing you. And if you don't have a budget, how do you even get close to it?
Right. Unfortunately, I working with so many agents over the years, I often find their budget is like, what's in the checking account, right? And I'm like, yeah, that's not a budget. And so what we need to think about right now is we need 2 budgets. We need one for work. And I know I'm asking a lot. If you're not comfortable with budgets, we need 2. We need a personal and we need a business budget. And we really need to stick with it. And I love in the shift book what we talk about, red light, green lighting those expenses, right? So what does that mean, Brett? Like, what does red light, green light mean?
Well, I mean, it certainly means you got to hold money accountable. And if money's not bringing that right return, that means the red light's flashing and you need to go take action on that investment or that variable expense or whatever you're spending money on. that is really kind of causing that red flashing light to you. But if I'm spending $1,000 a month, which seems like a lot in some scenarios, but it's bringing me $10,000 a month in revenue, that is green light all day long. Keep that going no matter what, because the worst thing you can do is on a long journey not pack enough fuel. Whether you're hiking a mountain and not having enough protein bars or water to get you through the journey, or not enough gas to go in that car, at the end of the day, you got to find the green lights in your business, because that is the rocket fuel that's going to take you wherever you're going on this journey. And you got to find the lumps of coal, I guess you could say, that are holding you down, and play red light with those. You know, Natascha, I want to throw something into this conversation, because really at the end of a budget is really a profit number. At the bottom of every statement, whether it's an income statement or a budget model or whatever, there's a profit number. And there's a margin, which is probably something that's not overly talked about, but business people absolutely talk about it. And really, profit margin says, hey, that's the one number I need to hold my business accountable to. Meaning,
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say that if you are running a business and you're utilizing the 30-40 model, that we should be taking 40% of our total, let's call it GCI, down to the bottom line as our profit number. That no matter what's happening, no matter what the market's doing, we need to hold that profit margin still accountable, which means that's where that red light, green light comes in. That's where we need to red light some of our expenses so that our profit margins stay the same.
Absolutely. So I like 4 times return on my money. You said 3 times. No matter what times you use, there's business principles to that. I can tell you more times than I'd like to admit, I've heard agents say, hey, Natascha, if I just sell one house, I'll cover this. And first of all, that's a bad business principle in any market. However, it'll bite you hard in a shifting market. So this is a very relevant conversation. There's one last term before we get to our 3 questions that I want your comment on. Lead with revenue. What on earth does that mean?
So that's a basic principle of this entire book. Lead with revenue and not expenses, which means we need to bring the money in before we can spend it. Unfortunately, in our industry, we count our chickens before they've hatched. So we look at our pending transactions and we look at things and think, okay, that money's coming in the future potentially, and we're already, spending up against it. What I want you to consider in this market, especially, or in any shifting market, is that you want to have the income and make sure that you're leading with revenue, meaning you're making money before you're spending that money.
Perfect. Well, listen, here's your 3 questions we want you to discuss this week around remargining your business. What do you see the difference between an investment and an expense to be?
When you invest, you expect to get a return. What are you investing in right now where you're not seeing a return? What are you investing in that's giving you a great return?
Yeah, that red light, green light, right? And then number 3, in a shift, expense management is critical. What are some things you can do right now to get ahead with your expense management?
Awesome. Well, this conversation was fantastic. We'd love you to mastermind further around it. We can't wait to see you next week when we get into tactic 4, which is find the motivated through generation.
Have a good one.
You as well.